It's Tuesday, time for coffee and cursey words. It's our first stream of 2022. Happy, happy, happy New Year, Law Nerds. We have so much to talk about. I have a new shock mount on my mic, which I don't think you can see, but I'm very excited about it. I'm hoping that when the cats come and like bump into the mic, it doesn't read as loud to y'all. Let me make sure that my proper mic is on. You know, we've got the things going this morning. I feel like it's been too long since I only streamed once last week. I have a snow filled yard outside reflecting all of the bright light in here today, and I'm very excited to be with you. Today, we are talking about the two latest convictions in both the Jolene Maxwell case and the Elizabeth Holmes case. There is so much to talk about. I know you have questions. We're going to just do those two cases, a little bit of housekeeping, and then into questions. I know so much has been going on. Other than that, with the passing of Betty White, so sad about that. But also like encouraged that at 99 years old, everyone's like, it wasn't enough time because she is a treasure. And that kind of life is inspiring. So I choose to take inspiration there. I also enjoy the energy of a new year. I dig it. I like a new year. I like a reset. There is an Emily Show episode coming out tomorrow that is my year in review 2021 that I've done on the podcast 2 years now. I've done one for 2019 and one for 2020. So it's a really fun episode to do. And I'm excited to bring that to you tomorrow because I love taking a look back. So I have my coffee, I have my cursey words, I have my facts. We are ready to go. We're going to have a whole, y'all buckle up and get ready to talk about federal sentencing and how the media doesn't know what they're talking about. Just buckle up because we'll have to talk about how much time you think these individuals are facing based on the headlines, and we'll go from there. So let me know where you're coming in from. It's so good to see all of you. I love how many folks we get from all over the world during coffee and cursey words. Just, I think the timing is so much easier for the broader international audience. So let us get into the intro. Let us get into the coffee and cursey words. Let us say hello and welcome to 2020, Law Nerds. We've got Jesus, did I just say 2020? 2022. Time is a construct. Nothing has moved forward in my mind since 2019. I feel like it's Groundhog Day. Like every year I'm like, happy 2020, happy 2020. I might be saying that till 2030. Who knows? But let us all just with that, I need more coffee. Hey there. If we haven't met yet, I'm Emily D. Baker, the badass lawyer and everyone's favorite legal commentator. I'm the host of The Emily Show, and I break down the legal shit behind the news and pop culture stories we all want to talk about. I have been a licensed attorney for over 15 years, but this is not legal advice. I should warn you, I'm a big fan of the cursey words. This channel is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not fuckery. So Charlene sent this through and it says, watch the proposal last night just to see Betty White. It is one of my favorite roles with her. I absolutely love that movie. Like her and Sandra Bullock out dancing by the fire to the windows, to the walls. It is just one of my favorite scenes of any movie of all time ever. And it is on my list of things to watch. Last night, what did I do last night? I made social media post about the Holmes conviction. I dove into the United States Code because I had some questions about the sentencing on both, and I needed a little bit more time to dig through because sentencing is not always clear cut in the way the code is written. So I was digging through the US code last night. I felt like I was in law school. It was kind of nice. I was like, ooh, what about this? And is this conspiracy charged under the conspiracy statute? We'll talk all about conspiracies. Charged under the conspiracy statute, not the pallet, charged under the underlying act statute, and some are and some aren't, and going through those and going through some of the legislative history. And then what else did I do last night? We got some stuff set up on T's computer desk. He's got a little bit of a new setup and a new cooling pad that has like the RGB lights. I'm always going to say RBG lights, the RGB lights. That's very cool. So we got him his gamer setup going, and dinner and then bed because I was exhausted. No movies last night. Well, that's not true. We watched Encanto during dinner and it's lovely. I love Encanto. It's so good. So Hannah said Tennessee gets snow like more than a dusting. We had over 5 inches of snow when we measured off of a hard surface. So we have we were blanketed in snow. I shared it in my Instagram stories. I'll have to share the photos again today. We had a good 5 inches of snow, which I mean, for those of y'all living elsewhere, you're like, girl, you didn't say 5 feet. No, I did not. It was enough to blanket everything. It is still sticking. But it was a good bit of snow, more than a dusting. We got snowed in for a week last year. So that was a lot. But it was like ice and snow and ice and snow, and it kept melting and freezing and melting and freezing because the weather goes like this. And the roads were just super, super slick. So you guys are like, I need that coffee mug. It's my new favorite. It's not as pretty as my oil slick one, but I love the handle. It's 20 ounces. Your girl likes a lot of coffee. It keeps it warm forever. This was a Stanley and Starbucks collab. These were sold out in California. There are still some of them in this collaboration around Tennessee. So where you are, they might be inside of Starbucks. But I don't know if this company, this one, the Stanley company, makes this mug without this color, without the Starbucks collab. I don't know. But I moved my mic to this side and now I'm still trying to find like where it's happy places so y'all can hear me. I'm not worried about me projecting, but I like it to sound nice. So, as we get into it for the replay crew, love you. I will be putting the timestamps down below as we get into our topics. We're not going to do a quick bits today because I've been running so long, and B, I know we're gonna have a lot of questions, and I feel gutted that we've been doing not nearly enough questions at all. Sister Babylon, the pogo stick has not disappeared yet. I need to share a picture of the pogo stick. It's not just a pogo. The thing is insane, but because it's icy, the kids haven't been able to use it. Did you make a snowman? I've made several in Animal Crossing, but our snow attempts here were not as good. We made a lot of snowballs and we had a lot of fun crunching around because it was really, really fluffy snow, and that was fantastic. So Charlene's like, a pittance, we got 2 feet. Yeah, we're not into the feet of snow here. Maybe that'll happen at some point. I can't say. I don't understand. It was 76 degrees on New Year's Day, and the next day it snowed. So that's kind of the Tennessee that we're getting used to. And what else? Somebody was asking about the pogo stick. My husband bought a pogo stick for the kids. The thing can get up to like 10 feet in the air. I'm terrified of it. It's an actual literal like massive hydraulic pogo stick. I'll put a picture of it in my stories over on the Insta. If you don't follow me there, it's at the Emily D. Baker. What else? There's a new podcast tomorrow. There's Friday Night Live this week. There are 2 things that I'm thinking of for Friday Night Live. We will see what else happens this week, but I'm hoping to talk more about the Toddy Westbrook case. There's been a number of things that have been going on in the case in both Washington and in Nevada. So pulling all those motions together and kind of not going line by line, but consolidating them and giving you the highlights. And then there's a new Shalene Johnson case that looks like a class action, 20 plus plaintiffs. She was sharing about it on social media yesterday. I got tagged in it by a number of you and sent it in DMs that she has filed a larger lawsuit, or is part of now a larger lawsuit against the doctor that is suing her. So she had not sued Dr. Molavi. I guess this is our quick bits. Me, we're not doing quick bits. Also me, quick bits. She and others are now suing Dr. Malavi or Dr. Laguna. He had previously sued her for defamation for things she was saying on social media. So now we have 2 lawsuits that are going to be going on with those parties. And at some point, I need to go get my nails done. I have been hunkered down at home. So with all of that said, should we do the Maxwell verdict first or the Holmes verdict first? I feel like Maxwell first because it happened first. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense, right? I think so. So Emma asked, are we going to talk about Prince Andrew? Tangentially to the Maxwell case, yes, but not in depth. So I think because the Maxwell verdict came down Last week, we should talk about that one first. So, the Maxwell case. The problem is every time I say Maxwell, my ADHD brain goes, the best part of waking up. But that's not even Maxwell. That's a Folgers commercial. I don't know what's happening in the brain today. This coffee has not kicked in yet. And that makes us a little more scattered than not. Maxwell was convicted on, let's see, 4 counts out of 6. She was not convicted of, or 5 counts out of 6. She was not convicted on 1 count, which was count 2. I'm going to go through what the counts are. Unfortunately, the Maxwell indictment is not as clear. It doesn't have a cover sheet like the Holmes indictment, so it's harder to see what the different counts are. Oh, but we can go through the jury forms. The judge has not posted them, by the way, which is the most annoying thing in the world, because in the Holmes case, we already have the signed jury forms. I just like to see them. Look, I'm nosy. I've always said that. I like to see what's going on in court. I like to see how things are laid out. But in the Maxwell case, A, lot has been sealed, but B, the jury forms aren't up. And I'm going to just go double check again, like as we're talking about it, we might as well just pull up Pacer, because I'm sure we're gonna need to go to the tape anyway at some point, and I will pull those up. But we don't have the signed verdict forms. There's nothing that's been on the docket since November or January 3rd. On January 3rd, they said that the parties must submit a joint letter by January 10th, which will be coming up, to propose a briefing schedule for the sentencing and for a Rule 29 motion. So the sentencing, they're going to set a schedule for briefing for the sentencing. This is why federal sentencing takes months. It's not just oral arguments. There is briefing that will go into what the potential max is, what the potential for, mitigation is, what the potential for aggravation is. Mitigation mean reasons that the sentence should be less. Aggravation means reasons that the sentence should be more, what the federal sentencing guidelines are. So everything I say in both of these cases are my interpretation of the code and my interpretation of what the potential maximum sentences are. I don't think anyone that we're talking about today, either Maxwell or Holmes, is going to get the maximum. It's just not going to happen. Do not set your sights on max them out, throw away the key. That is not going to happen in either of these cases. It doesn't mean that they can't get some substantial prison time, probably Maxwell more than Holmes. But the sentencing, they're not even setting a briefing schedule till January 10th, which means sentencing probably won't be until March, if not later. In the Maxwell case, we don't even have a sentencing briefing schedule for the Holmes case yet, and we will talk about that. So as we get into the Maxwell case, let me pull up the jury instructions, because in the jury instructions, we see the breakdown of what the charges are. So as I go through what was convicted and what wasn't, I think that'll be helpful to just take a look at them. And we've done this in the other content where I've covered this case. So this will have all the words. I will try to parse my words, because YouTube got super mad the last time I talked about this case about using all of the words. So YouTube, look, this is for educational purposes. We will parse the words a little bit, but it's the new year. I like to be monetized. My top video for 2021 is a video that is not monetized. Well, I chose not to monetize it because it felt icky to monetize it. But I would like to not just regularly get slapped upside the head with no monetization, because we're a full-time content creator up in here. All right, I've said all right like 7 times. All right. I've said all right as much as Matthew McConaughey on a good day. We're all like, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. YouTube, stop being offended by the words. This is for educational purposes. We have to talk about the things. And if we can't talk about the things, how do people know what the things are happening? These are the laws, people, the laws. Count 1, conspiracy to entice individuals under the age of 17 to travel in interstate commerce. A side note, in interstate commerce does not mean they have to prove that they traveled, but that they were intending to travel, even though in this case, numerous of these victims were trafficked in interstate commerce, but with the intent to engage in illegal I always want to say SA, but SA has the assaultive context, but to engage in illegal adult activity, we'll just go with that. Count 2, this count 1, by the way, was guilty. Count 2, enticement of an individual as to Jane only, which is the used name in this trial for one of the victims. A lot of the victims did not go by their given names. Completely understand why. Also, in a federal case, it's a little more private. They weren't drawn, et cetera, et cetera. So drawn by the court sketch artist and stuff. So that enticement of an individual to travel with intent to engage in illegal adult activity. Count 2, this was a count that was not guilty. For the Maxwell verdict, this is the only count that was not guilty. Count 3, conspiracy to transport individuals under the age of 17 to travel in interstate commerce with intent to engage in illegal adult activity. So conspiracy to transport. First was conspiracy to entice. So the grooming and the luring versus the actual act of transporting. The conspiracies are the criminal agreements. Count 4, transportation of an individual, Jane only, with intent to engage. That was guilty. So as to victim Jane, they did not find that Maxwell directly enticed that victim for whatever reason, but that Maxwell was part of the conspiracy to entice, and that Maxwell did in fact engage in the transporting of Jane and the conspiracy to transport. So this is all going to break down on the way that testimony came out and how much direct contact Maxwell had with this particular victim. And in this testimony, it's my understanding from watching other coverage that with regard to this victim, it wasn't as much direct contact with her and Maxwell as others had. Count 5 is conspiracy to commit trafficking of individuals under 18. And then, or that was count 5. And count 6 is the trafficking of individuals under the age of 18. We're going to go through what the sentencing is on this. But that's why I think we got that count 2 not guilty, but she was guilty of the conspiracy. With conspiracy, and this is something that's quirky with conspiracy laws that not everyone agrees with when it comes to conspiracy. The conspiracy itself is its own crime. The agreement, the illegal agreement is its own crime, even if the underlying act, the underlying crime doesn't take place. So even if and that's where you get that split in count 1 and count 2. Even if they find that she didn't engage directly enough to be convicted on count 2, she was part of the criminal agreement for count 1. Conspiracies can be sentenced in addition to the underlying crimes. So when we look at the conspiracy to transport individuals and then the transporting, these can be alleged on the same facts and they can be sentenced on the same facts. So these can add under 371, which is the code section that all these conspiracies are charged under. You can have a sentence under 371, but that's not what happened in all of these. So with regard to Maxwell, I want you to put in the chat what sentencing ranges you have seen. And if you're watching this in the comments after in the replay crew, what sentencing ranges you have seen that Maxwell's maximum potential sentences, just put them down below. I imagine there will be some divergence here. And I had to go back through and reevaluate some of these sections to see what her maximum potential is. Again, once we get to the sentencing memos, we will have a clearer image of what it is. So I'm seeing Susie saying 65, 20, 40, up to 60, 5 to 25, up to 65, 25, 35, 20 to 30, 65. Emma says life. So there are quite a lot of ranges here. 20 years max, 20, 40 to 45, 20, 72 months. So when we're looking at max potential sentences, there has been a lot of confusion, which is what her maximum potential is, like the most they can do. With regard to Maxwell, none of these charges merge into each other. So unlike when we talked about the Duggar case where they were lesser included crimes, the trafficking and the conspiracy to traffic are two separate crimes and you can be sentenced on both of them consecutively. Not necessarily that's what the judge is going to do, sentence them like stacking them one after the other. They're not required to. They can run concurrently. But let's talk about what the maximum is and go from there. So some of you were saying 25 to life, 25, 10. So I had to go back through because even when I initially calculated this, I went back through and recalculated it because I had calculated some of the conspiracy counts wrong because I had calculated them under the conspiracy statute and not under the underlying statute, and it gets tricky. So as to count one, the conspiracy, that's a violation of code 2422. So a conspiracy to violate the enticement code. The enticement code carries a maximum of 20. That was count 2. She wasn't convicted of that. But the underlying conspiracy for that only carries a maximum of 5. The enticement section does not say that a conspiracy is sentenced under the enticement section. So for count 1, I'm giving it 5 years max under 18 USC 371 because the underlying crime, the conspiracy to commit the enticement, does not say that enticement is sentenced under the enticement statute. The reason I point that out is because that is different when we get to the next cases. So conspiracy to transport and transportation are counts 3 and counts 4. Counts 3 and 4 are both sentenced under the transportation section. So under the transportation section, maybe it would be helpful if I just show you what I mean. Okay, let me go to the US code. This is going to feel like law school. I'm sorry, everyone who's like, I have PTSD from law school, but this might feel like we can understand what we're talking about. So I can just show you what I mean under the United States code. So let me pull up the code online. I always go directly to the code and not to other recitations of the code. I go to the code first. I interpret the code first. I look at the history of the code first, and then I go sometimes to other sources. But the code is where I start. And then I'm going to look at everybody's sentencing memos and see what they say, because there might be sentencing memos that say, no, there are other sections of the law that say that these things interact differently, which would be interesting. So let us go to the code. So for counts 3 and 4, this is how I'm breaking this down. Count 3 is charged under USC section 371, the broad conspiracy statute. But under section 2423, which is the transportation section, it specifically says in that code section that any violation of that section, let's just pull up the code. The font is small on the code. I'm sorry, it just is. I can't fix it. I can't change it. It's just small. Under this code section, see, miserable. It's miserable to look at, but it is the US code. I would just say to the government website, please make the font bigger. This is miserable. But with that, section E, and this is why I always liked when I worked doing criminal prosecution, I liked having these things printed out so I could like highlight and make notes and just keep it. And that's what I did. But here we go. Attempt and conspiracy. Under this section of transportation, attempt and conspiracy has its own subsection and says whoever attempts or conspires to violate subsection A, B, C, or D, which is what she was convicted of here, shall be punishable in the same manner as a completed version, a completed violation of that subsection. So for that, you guys are saying Control Plus increases the font. What? I've learned something new. I've Control F'd, but I did not know about Control. Hold on. We're gonna try. Nope. I don't think the US website is oh, wait. It worked, but it just made the page bigger. It did not actually make the font bigger, but it laid it out better. So yes. Thank you, everybody. Yes, Katya's like Command Plus. It was Command Plus. I need to make Command F yourself shirts as well. Thank you for the Command F, everybody. Woohoo! I learned things. Chat, you're the best. Thank you. Let's see. Magical. Okay, we have better fonts. This is life-changing. I'm very excited. Much better. So, the attempting conspiracy are punishable in the same manner as the completed violation. So the conspiracy charge and the underlying charge are punished by the same amount of time. And in this case, subsection A, which is what she was convicted of, is imprisoned not less than 10 years or for life. So she is facing technically life in prison. But the bottom of that is 10 years for both counts. So 10 plus 10 can be 20. That said, the court can stack those or the court can run those concurrently. So the court doesn't have to say 10 plus 10 is 20. The court can say 10 plus 10 is 10 and you serve it at the same time, if that makes sense. So Ashley Vincent's like, I was today years old. I was today years old too, Ashley. So 10 plus 10 does not always equal 20, but the mandatory minimum is 10 on these counts, I believe 3 and 4. So those are or for life. So you can get life. Maxwell could get life. Do I think that will happen? No. Does that leave open a lot of room for the judge to choose a sentence? Possibly. That leaves a lot of room. So on count 1, we have 5 years, no mandatory minimum. No, like you have to serve this much minimum. No mandatory minimum on count 1, 5 years. Counts 2, not guilty. Count 3 and 4, 10 years to life is the sentencing range for counts 3 and 4. So now we're at like 10 years mandatory minimum plus 10 plus 5. So we're at 25 to life, and we have to get to counts 5 and 6. So let's scout to count 5 and 6. Count 5 is the conspiracy to traffic. Count 6 is the trafficking. So here's the thing. We just saw what this code section said. We just looked at the fact that there is a subsection E that specifically addresses attempt and conspiracy, that if you attempt to do this or conspire to do this, you get the same sentence as if you did it. And because she both conspired to do it and did it and was convicted of that, 10 is the mandatory minimum. That's what not less than means. That's your mandatory minimum. So let's go to the next section, and you'll see where there's some discrepancy here, because the next two is the conspiracy to traffic and the trafficking being under section 1591A and B2, but the conspiracy still being under section 371. Here's the interesting thing. With this section 1591, the trafficking by force or fraud, she is sentenced under A1, or what she has done is under A1. Here's our punishment section, the punishment for the offense of the section. And she is, let's see, I need to check real quick. I think she's sentenced under B2. Yes, under B2. So she will be sentenced under subsection B2. That's what they alleged and what they charged. Here's subsection B. The punishment for the offense under subsection A is, here's B2, because the individual was between 14 and 18 years old, not under the age of 14. Age does matter in this case. Under 14, it's 15 to life. Over 14, yet under 18 is 10 years to life. But this section does not have a provision that says a conspiracy or an attempt is sentenced the same way. So with that, she is, I believe, the conspiracy of this charge is 5 years, not less than 10. So we now have 3 counts with a 10-year mandatory minimum for 30, and then we have 2 counts of 5 years at 40. So I think our range is 40 to life for her potential mandatory. Now that could be 45 to life if you sentence this conspiracy under the predicate statute, but it does not say that, and it doesn't say that in subsequent statutes. So that's how I'm getting to that 40 to 45 to life range. Do I think she will get life? No. Do I think she has to get a mandatory of at least 10? Yes. She is 60 years old and by all accounts has not been doing well in custody. Do I think even 10 years could potentially be a devastating sentence at 60 years old? Yes. Do I hope that that is at least 2 mandatory minimum sentences for 20? Yes. Do I think it's warranted in this case? Yes. Do I think that there are still 2 counts to go? Remember, she was only tried on all of these allegations. She was not tried on the perjury allegations. There are still 2 more counts of perjury that she has not been tried on. Now, after um after this and after all of these convictions that carry a very heavy amount of time, could she just plea to the perjury? Probably. Will she do that? I don't know. We'll see in the sentencing memos. She may not. She might not plea on that because she might appeal all of this and probably will. There is already a letter memo about from the defense asking for a mistrial because of some of the instructions given to the jury. So there will be a number of appeals and things like that. So we will see um, what happens when the sentencing memos come out. We will see the sentencing memos and we will get to see what the government's arguing for, what the defense is arguing for, and that aggravation, more time, and mitigation, less time. So mandatory minimum of 10 at the lowest. This isn't a, hey, you can do probation. I think it's not less than. I I firmly believe that the words not less than means you have to have 10. You have to have 10 on 3 of these counts. That they don't have to run consecutively. They can run concurrently or at the same time. So 10 years at a minimum and then up to life. So the judge could sentence in there. I don't think she will get a life sentence to this. I think that would be out of step with what traditional sentencing is. Will the people who benefited from this trafficking ring, the people who were the I hate to say the consumers, the predators, the perpetrators, the people who these girls were being trafficked for. I don't think they were all being trafficked for Epstein. Will they? I said the name. I am probably going to now be immediately demonetized. We have to talk about it, people. There were people who benefited from this. It wasn't just a ring of these young girls for one person. And do I think any of those individuals will be prosecuted? It is unlikely. Would I hope to see that? Yes. Do I think that we will realistically? No. No, I don't. I think that this is probably the end of this, other than the civil suit going on with Prince Andrew. So either way, not less than 10, but between 40 and 45 to life is where I'm seeing the sentencing range, which is more than I originally believed when I was looking at this. When I first looked at this, I was like, oh, I didn't see the mandatory minimums on some of these, which is why I try not to do things too quick. But sometimes I'm like, ooh, conviction, go back to my day. So that's where I'm at with that. Let's talk about Prince Andrew real quick. He is in court today on the Virginia, I think it's Gouffre on that case. She is one of the Maxwell victims. Her name came up in trial quite a bit. She is personally suing Prince Andrew civilly for being one of the do we s- perpetrators, predators, customers. Customers sounds so awful, but for being one of the people she was trafficked for. And they are arguing, Prince Andrew's attorneys are arguing that the settlement agreement she reached with Jeffrey Epstein for like $500,000 or whatever it was, that settlement agreement said, and not sue any other defendants. Prince Andrew is saying, I am one of the other people. You can't sue me. I'm shielded by that settlement agreement. That settlement agreement was reached in Florida. So Virginia's attorneys By the way, Virginia's attorney is David Boyce, Elizabeth Holmes's Theranos chief counsel. Just, just to just to put a circle around all of this. Um, but her attorney is arguing that because the settlement agreement was reached in a jurisdiction that did not reach Prince Andrews, that the settlement agreement contemplated Maxwell and Epstein. It did not contemplate Prince Andrew and others, so that settlement agreement does not shield him from being civilly sued for his behavior. So the civil lawsuit is being heard the motion with regard to the settlement agreement is being heard today. So we will see what happens later today, unless, of course, the judge takes it under advisement and gives a ruling later. So that's what's going on in the Prince Andrews case. We will see what happens, hopefully today on that hearing, but also possibly not. Again, the judge can take it under advisement and look at the law and look at the settlement agreement and see if it's true that Prince Andrew was contemplated and covered by it. I don't think that Prince Andrew will be covered by it. I think that settlement agreement anticipated that Maxwell and Epstein would be covered and protected by the settlement. Like, hey, you can't sue us, the perpetrators, not you can't sue anyone who was ever involved. Oh, look, we're already in the yellow. Let me just tell YouTube that we're here for educational purposes real quick because YouTube's already salty at me. It's like you said Epstein, we're automatically saying that your video is not okay for monetization. See, the problem is when it goes yellow is that I don't really care about the monetization. It's not that's the problem. It's when it goes yellow, YouTube doesn't push the video out and show it to people in recommends and things like that because they're not making money off of it, right? Because they think it's not suitable. I think it's because they're not pushing a lot of ads on it, so they're not going to make as much money off of it, so they don't push it out so other people can see it because they're not making money off it. Do we see how it goes? So with that, I always try to remind them that this is for educational purposes. And we had gotten to a good place for a while. And now they're back to like every time you say Maxwell or Epstein, the videos seem to get buried a little bit. And that troubles me. I'm sure it's the algorithm saying, oh, well, if you're talking about this, you're probably talking about really horrible, disgusting behavior. True, but we're not detailing it. We're adults here for educational purposes. We're not glorifying it. We're talking about why you can go to prison. But this is why it's hard to talk about things because it's interesting watching the way YouTube does it, which is why I just bring on sponsors who know what I talk about. And I'm like, we have sponsors, it's fine. It's not the money, it's the principle of the thing. And the principle of the thing pisses me off. So we will answer more questions about this case, I am sure. I want to cover the bulk of the Holmes stuff and just answer all of the questions together. Otherwise, A, I might not get to the Holmes stuff. B, I will likely forget something. And C, I will completely get distracted. So with that, if it is your first time in the Danielle said, nickname that island guy. I like it. I like it. It feels like we should be like E and M and just refer to everybody in code names. But I also like there's a deep part of me that also fucking hates that. I'm like, this is in the news. This is important. This matters. This is the type of case that can encourage others to be like, oh, what these really fucked up adults around me are doing is wrong. Oh, this is not okay. Oh, there can be prosecutions for this. It's important to talk about how our judicial system works, and it can't happen if platforms don't allow that conversation. I think at the end of the day, it will be fine. YouTube has generally looks at my stuff and is like, oh, that's right. We are talking about educational things for educational purposes. The principle of the thing makes me. So If it is your first time here live, go ahead and put a 1 in the comments. Let's see who is here live. I'm gonna tell you a quick story and then we're gonna switch. Um, because after I'm done ranting, because it matters. It matters. And it's frustrating to me. But again, this is why I bring on sponsors, because then I can say, you know what, my principles are more important than monetization. It's the reach that kills me. It is so good to see all you new lovely law nerds. Welcome to your first time live. Live is always fun. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So New Year's Eve, we celebrated with the kids. The family's been under the weather. Everybody's just been like, "Ugh." And we just we absolutely hung out. We hung out just as a family. We watched movies, and then we watched the the music note drop in Nashville. I think it's the first time that they did that. Last year was a weird year because of the panini. So with that, we watched the music note drop. We were very glad we weren't out in large crowds. I don't love large crowds anyway. I spent one New Year's in Vegas. I will never again. Because large crowds are just so we watched all that at home, and I was on Twitter watching their wrap up for the end of the year, and the header on my Twitter kind of explore the search bar had ABC's The Year 2021 playing while I was looking at all the New Year's news. So I open up my Twitter little like search thing. I don't even know what it's called on Twitter. When you go to the little search icon and it takes you into the like top trending news story or the what's happening stories. And it was my face on Twitter. It was so strange. I was like, "Oh, okay. That's my face." It was very weird seeing ABC The Year, and I got quite a lot of messages that ABC The Year 2021 was playing again on New Year's Eve, and that a number of you saw it. So for any of you that have found me from ABC and my commentary on ABC, thank you. It was weird. I'll have to share a picture. I took a screenshot. I was so disoriented by it. I'm like, why is my face on my Twitter like trending thing? Like, what is it? What is happening? So I will share that on Instagram and on Twitter later today after we stream. But let us so that is the story I was going to tell. It was just so strange. Hello, El Jefe. Good to see you, friend. With that, we should get into talking about Holmes. Holmes is one of the cases I've given the most commentary on abroad. I've talked to the BBC about it and Times Radio London about it. It is definitely the case that's gotten quite a lot of interest abroad, where YouTube, like all of us here on YouTube, want to talk about like Tati and H3 and Cav and all of the mess there. The international audience that reaches out wants to hear about the Rust shooting and the Elizabeth Holmes trial. And it's just so funny watching the difference between the interest of what people are looking at and what the differences are there. Lorray said, Emily, you and your hair, or Lori, I'm going to say one of three ways. You and your hair looked fantastic on ABC. Thank you. My amazing hairdresser Garland came to my house and did my hair. I had hair and makeup done. I couldn't handle the stress of trying to do that myself. And I loved it. And I wish my hair looked like that every day. It doesn't. It looks like this. We're going to be honest. Not every day. Some days, but not every day. Let's swoop and go talk about Elizabeth Holmes, because it happened yesterday and there's a lot that happened. For those of you that haven't been following Elizabeth Holmes, I do have a playlist here of the Holmes case, breaking down the stuff from the beginning. It's been covered very well on both the Bad Blood, like final chapter podcast, and the Dropout. It's going to be a documentary-ish, not a documentary, like a docudrama, I guess, with Amanda Seyfried on ABC. ABC produces the Dropout podcast. The Dropout podcast has been fantastic reporting, great interviews. It's just really, really well done. So if you're interested in diving deeper, Bad Blood, and then Bad Blood's also that was The Inventor. So there's The Inventor, I think, is on HBO. Bad Blood and Dropout have all had excellent coverage, and I've been covering that briefly, not as in depth, absolutely, as they have. So, with that, we're going to go through what Elizabeth Holmes is charged with. When I said that the indictment on the Maxwell case didn't have a face sheet the same way that the indictment in California did, it was this that I was talking about. In the northern, and every district does things differently. In the northern district, the face sheet was signed. This is the face sheet from the indictment after the grand jury. And this breaks down the different counts and the particular code section they are charging them with, which makes life so much easier than digging through the indictment to which code sections, especially when you have conspiracy charges. These conspiracy to commit wire fraud are very specific charges, the 1349. The wire fraud itself is these 1343 charges. So here's counts 3 through 8, counts 9 through 11, counts 1 and 2. This is the indictment signed by the foreperson, signed by the judge from June 2018. They put out the warrants, and this is for both Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani. Sunny Balwani will be coming to trial March, April. So he has not gone to trial yet. So let's pull up the verdict forms and talk about what this jury did. This case has been going on for like 3 months. The jury deliberated for 7-ish days. It was substantial deliberation, but it was also broken up. Like the case rested early on in December, like December 8th or 9th. And then the court was dark because the judge was unavailable until the 16th. And then that's when they did closing arguments on the 16th. And then the jury went to deliberate like a day. And then they had a break for Christmas. Then they came back. And then they had a break for the new year. And then they came back. So the jury deliberation process has been very scattered and things have taken so much time. Let us pull up the verdicts. In this case, we actually got the verdicts, like in the Duggar case, where we got the verdict forms. I'm annoyed that we don't have them in the Maxwell case, but that's my own annoyance. I don't know. It just feels so official when you get to actually see the verdict forms in the jurors' handwriting and see what they've done. So these are the verdict forms on the Holmes case, and then we'll talk about it. It's interesting. They did not line out. I've seen a lot of juries circle the one and then line out the one. They didn't. They just wrote it in. They're not good or bad. It's just point of curiosity for me. Count 1, guilty of the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud against Theranos investors. Not guilty of the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud against Theranos paying patients. This is unable to reach a verdict, so they left it blank. They are hung on count 3, which is wire fraud against investors in the wire transfer of $99,990 on December 30th, 2013. Hung on wire fraud against investors for this $5.3 million amount. Hung on wire fraud against investors in this $4.8 million amount. So these go to different investors. The amount of money is the wire transfer. So that's the wire fraud, but these each go to different investors. Then you get to count 6, 7, and 8. These are in connection with Theranos investors. We'll talk about which investors in a minute because I don't want to mix them up. Truthfully, I just don't want to screw it up by saying, so the 38 million as to one investor, the 99.999.984 million, almost $100 million. That's the DeVos family, I believe, as to count 7, and then the 5.9 million as to another investor. So those 3 investors, guilty. And then as to these last 3 charges, as to patient lab results, not guilty. So this is each a specific patient. The wire fraud being alleged on these 2 is that the patient's lab results were transported to the patient and that those lab results were part of this ongoing wire fraud, not a conspiracy, but actual wire fraud. So not the agreement, that she was committing wire fraud. And then the last one was the wire fraud against paying patients in a connection with a wire transfer of $1.1 million in 2015. So that is the breakdown of the verdicts. Counts 6, 7, and 8 guilty. Count 10, 11, 12 not guilty. Counts 3, 4, and 5 hung. Count 1 guilty. Count 2 not guilty. And we'll talk about why in a minute. I want to talk about sentencing first. I will talk about sentencing and then talk about the why and the how. But let's go to, where did I break it down? I broke it down in my notes. Where are my notes? Which investors were which as to the guilty counts. So as to the guilty counts, count 6 was investor Brian Grossman, count 7 was the DeVos family, and count 8 was Dan Mosley. So those are the 3 investors. Those names may have meaning to you, they may not, and either way, it's totally fine. I'm gonna close. We got too many tabs open. Too many tabs open in my brain. This one was a little bit easier to go through sentencing wise because it's a little it's all the same charges and it's a little cleaner with regard to what she's facing versus what she's not facing. With regard to the 1349 conspiracy count, the max is 20 years and a fine, no mandatory minimum. And as to the 1343 counts, the actual wire fraud counts, the max is 20 years, no mandatory minimum, plus a fine. And those fines can get high, hundreds of thousands of dollars high, into the millions of dollars high. So she is convicted of, 4 counts. So 20, 40, 60, 80 is her max because it's none of these are going to conflate into each other. None of them are lesser included crimes. The conspiracy can be sentenced in addition to the other counts. The government can choose to retry her on counts 3, 4, and 5, the hung counts. Or she can plead guilty and they can, reduce their sentencing recommendation to the judge, or they can just drop it and not pursue it against her and say, look, we've got her on 4 counts. There's no need in going after them. Or what they can choose to do is see how it plays out as to Balwani. They can choose to change, if they want to change some of the way the evidence plays out, they can, and see what happens in the Sunny Balwani trial that's coming up later in 2022, and then decide if they want to retry her or not. So she can plead guilty to those counts to be done with it. The government can choose not to pursue them again, or the government can try them again. Those are the 3 things that can happen with the hung counts. A mistrial will be declared as to those counts, and they can be retried. But she is facing a maximum potential sentence of lots and lots of fines and up to 80 years. Will she get that? Not even close. Will she even get 20? Probably not. I could see her in like that 5 to 10 range. The judge may take into consideration that she has a young child. She had a baby and the trial got put over because she had a baby. So that baby is 4 to 6 months old or something at this point, because she had her kid not that long before the trial began, and the trial's been going on for 3 months. So somewhere in there, 4, 6 months, years old. The judge can take that into consideration. The jury can, or the prosecution can argue that timing was a sympathy thing. Now, I think a prosecutor has to be very careful about arguing that a woman has had a baby to avoid prison time, but I'm not saying that they won't. So with this, I think we might see her. I don't know. I don't even think we'll get into that 10-year range. I think 5 is what I'm optimistically looking for. So we'll see. The amount of money can bump the time up. The fact that she has no record can bump the time down. So that with the split in the verdict, I think it's interesting the way that they split the verdicts. They really did split the verdicts down to, I think, did they believe that Holmes herself defrauded, and that is really the heart of wire fraud. When we went through the jury instructions last week, you can go back to that video last Wednesday where we went through the jury instructions. Did she take the active steps herself to defraud patients? And it'll be in, I think what the jury likely did was saying, look, we heard with regard to these investors, We heard her on an investor call saying things that were misleading, saying things that were actively, perhaps willfully targeted at misleading investors to bring in additional funds. But she didn't have direct contact or direct representations to patients. The company had marketing statements, but were those marketing statements Elizabeth Holmes herself misleading potential patients? Did a patient look at Theranos and go, yes, I have to have my blood tested there because Elizabeth Holmes said this? And did that come across on the trial? So I think that that's probably where the jury went. I won't be surprised if we hear from some of the jurors in the coming days about what they thought with regard to, did Elizabeth Holmes herself mislead and defraud patients versus investors? Because we have a jury note from a week or whatever more ago, before Christmas, I think, where they asked to rehear the recorded investor call. And I wonder if the recorded investor call was using her words against her. She said to investors these things that weren't true, and she could look at it and be like, hey, or the jury could look at it and be like, hey, these are the things she directly said to investors to induce them to invest that weren't true. But the patients were relying on marketing. The lab director was the one in charge of running the tests, not her. And perhaps that's why we get this split between the investor counts and the patient counts, that she wasn't as involved in misleading patients per se, because she's not being charged with the fact that the lab results were wrong. That was dealt with them losing their certification and with the whistleblowers raising that issue. Was she defrauding them through misrepresentations to the patients? And it looks like the jury decided no, not beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean they were like, well, she should have done things differently. It means that beyond a reasonable doubt, they did not believe that she actively defrauded investors and then used the wires to submit those results as part of that fraud. And that, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that that's when I saw the way that they split. It doesn't surprise me that that's where they split. What I'm curious about is how on counts 3, 4, and 5, how those investors are different from the investors in counts 6, 7, and 8. And I need to go back through and look at some of the reporting on this and match those investors together. Were those investors that were not on the call? Like, was the investor call the number one thing that changed their mind? And on those hung counts, were those investors not on the call, or were those investors that said in their testimony they didn't rely on the call, they relied on other things, or were they investors that didn't testify? So those are kind of the things I'm looking at where I have questions that I want to go back and do a little bit of a deeper dive into this. Unlike Maxwell, and Maxwell has been in custody pending trial, Holmes is still out of custody. She was not taken into custody yesterday. There will be a hearing next week that will set sentencing, that will probably dismiss those hung counts, because it doesn't seem that the court did that yesterday in court. Let me just look at the docket and see if the court has done that yet. But yesterday when I looked, I had not seen it, and then I did not look before I went live. Why? Because I was making coffee on and putting on eyeliner. That's what and talking to my kids. It is their last day of break. So after this, we're gonna go play Mario Party. I'm gonna lose again. Because my oldest wins every round of Mario Party. So let's see. Okay, we've got one more minute order from the count in the from the court. Let's just pull it up and do it together. I love that on Pacer you can tell which court you're in because the dockets show up different. Like, this is the one for Maxwell, which is a completely different color than the ones from Holmes. I like that they are color coded so you know what case you're in. When you have multiple windows open, it's like all of the tabs of my brain. All right. This minute order would have come down or been entered last night after I got off of Pacer because I hadn't seen it yet. Let's see. Let's just pull up the whole thing. And Minute order. Let's go through it together and then I'll download it. Um, Time in court, and then they gave the time in court yesterday. There was a jury question. They had to read the verdicts. They had other court hearings. So total time in court yesterday was 1 hour and 31 minutes. The attorneys that were present. Further proceedings held on jury trial day 53. Further jury trial held. Jury resumes deliberations. Partial jury verdict rendered. The court finds there is a mistrial. Okay, so the court did declare the mistrial yesterday. The court finds there's a mistrial as to counts 3, 4, and 5 of the third superseding indictment. Counsel shall meet and confer and notify the court of proposed dates for status conference. Defendant to remain on current pretrial release conditions. See attached log. Let's see the log. And this is just what went on in court yesterday. 10:47 a.m. Court in session outside presence of jury with counsel and defendant. The court is in receipt of juror note 3 and reads the note on the record. Court then goes off the record at 11:09. Court in session, jury seated. The court reads additional instructions to the jury. The court instructs the jury to return to the deliberation room for further deliberation. That was the, hey, what do we do if we can't reach a verdict question? 11:15, jury returns to the deliberation room. 11:16, court in session outside of the presence of the jury with counsel and defendant. To confirm the instructions were read as discussed by the party. Counsel confirmed that they were. Court takes a recess. 3:19, court is in session outside the presence of the jury. The court is in receipt of jury note 4 and reads the note on the record. 3:31, court in session with counsel and defendant. Jury seated. The court inquires of the jury regarding note number 4. The court instructs the jury to return back to the deliberation room to complete the jury verdict and inform the court when it is completed. So I don't know exactly what question 4 said. I imagine it said, we have deliberated. We are still unable to reach a verdict. What do we do? And the court said, go back and fill out the jury verdict form as to the verdicts you have reached. Do not worry about the jury verdicts that you haven't reached. Leave those blank. That's what I'm guessing that happened, because then the timing was here. The court instructs the jury to go back to the room and complete the verdict form. Counsel requests a sidebar. 3:37, the court on the record sealed proceeding, sidebar in small jury room. The court ordered this portion of the transcript be sealed and cannot be accessed without a court order. So whatever happened at this sidebar, whatever went on there, has been sealed. The court then goes off the record. At 4:02, the court's in session outside the presence of the jury with counsel and defendant. Court and counsel in session, jury seated. So the jury came into the jury room at 4:05. The court reads the verdict. Jury is individually polled, confirming a unanimous verdict, which means, is this your verdict, for each juror? And they say yes. Sometimes they say no. And then that causes huge fucking problems. 4:22, the court takes a recess. The jury left. The reporters, it seems, went outside. 4:52, the court is in session with counsel and defendants. Jurors have been discharged. The court makes a finding that there's a mistrial as to counts 3, 4, and 5 of the third superseding indictment. The court defers referral to the probation office for preparation of a pre-sentence report at this time. The court requests that the bond be modified from unsecured bond to a secured bond, secured cash or property bond, meaning you need to put up some money so you don't run now that there's been a guilty verdict. The court requests that defense counsel and defendant contact pretrial services to schedule a meeting with pretrial service officer and obtain information and prepare an updated pretrial release report. The counsel meet and confer about their availability to schedule a status conference to address how the government will proceed as to counts 3, 4, and 5, defendant's pretrial release, conditions, and a sentencing date. Counsel shall notify the court of a proposed hearing date. The defendant's current pretrial release conditions remain in effect. It just has to be secured with money or property. And they will they're going to set a date. They're going to set a date to pick a date. They're going to have a meeting to schedule a meeting. So they're going to set a date to have a hearing on the counts 3, 4, and 5, the release conditions, and the sentencing date. So that's what's going to happen next. There will be another court date that will then set the sentencing date. The sentencing date will probably be in 3 or 4 months. That's pretty standard with the federal court system. And that is the last thing that we have. Let me go ahead and save that. So A, so I don't have to download it again, and B, so I don't forget. This will go into that file. So Dr. Riley said that meeting could be an email. The meeting could totally be an email. It's like, You need to come back for a status conference. And at that status conference, tell me what date you've agreed on as to the other thing. But also, because they have um, those three outstanding counts that were hung, I think that's why the court wants them to come in and have that discussion about what they're going to do with those counts. Otherwise, you would see something like the Maxwell court that said, send both of you submit a joint letter to the court, a memo to the court saying, Your Honor, we've agreed that this is the briefing schedule for sentencing and this is the sentencing date. The attorneys would meet and confer together to decide on that. They would talk to the court clerk and be like, is the court available that day? And then they would send the court a memo saying, this is what we've decided. Y'all pick a date amongst yourselves. Because there's still those outstanding 3 counts, I think that's why the court wants them to come back. And they need to prove that Elizabeth Holmes has put up either cash or property to secure her bond. She's been out on an unsecured bond. Hello, my friend Sam Munoz. Good to see you. So that's what's going on with that. And with that, I'm sure y'all have questions. You have questions. I have questions. We have questions. Let's see. I've forgotten to write down all of my timestamps today. So if the timestamps are off, replay crew, apologies. It's on me. So I'm already seeing questions in the chat. I'm going to get to super chats as well. And we've got time to you've got questions. I've got questions. We've got questions. Let's have questions. Let's do questions. I should swoop to the questions. Questions. Let us. The lid's on. That's embarrassing. I'm really trying to get my coffee. All right. Let me get to super chats real quick. Thank you for the super chats. As YouTube decides that I'm allowed to talk about cases without getting immediately monetized. So I appreciate it. But also it lets YouTube know you're engaged. Look, it's quality content, YouTube. Quality content. Question from Southern Hot Mess. Hello. On those 3 hung counts, if the government decides to go to trial again, how will they find a jury that has not heard of this case, or does that matter? Oh, it does matter. I think it would be a longer process now that she has gone to trial, but that would all be handled in pretrial motions and in voir dire. So they would be asking jurors, can you keep an open mind? Have you heard of this case? They found a jury this time faster than I thought they would. It's always amazing when something's in our periphery, like we see it so much, right? We see it on our social media. We see it when we watch a lot of YouTube. If you watch a lot of YouTube commentary, you see things that relate to YouTube commentary and you're like, oh, well, of course. And then you talk to normies who are like, who's Shane Dawson? And you're like, oh my God, I can't begin at the beginning of Dramageddon. So I think it's the same with everything. There will be people who just haven't paid attention. So, and if that becomes a bigger problem, they can move the court. They probably won't need to, but they can also move venue to an area where they think they can find a jury that has not been tainted, if you will, by the media relating to the case. I think they'll be able to find one. I mean, it's one of the things Jen Shah's attorneys were arguing, right? Like, oh my God, the Housewife and the Hustler, or the Shaw Shocker documentary. We're never going to find a jury. And the judge is like, bitch, please. There's plenty of people that didn't watch the Hulu documentary, that have never heard of Jen Shah, that are in New York, that don't give a shit about what's happening on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I, for one, am not one of those people. I am fascinated by what's going on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I am horrified that Jen Shah's mom is going to liquidate her retirement instead of Jen Shah selling her clothes. But Jen Shah doesn't have real property, which we learned from this arrest. She is renting everything. It's just a house of cards. But if there's money offshore, that money's not getting paid to your attorneys for a $2 million retainer. It's very interesting the way that that's going about. So let me get through some of the super chats and I will get to questions. I am not letting them scroll up so I can get to them. I might be a little bit behind. Tropicali question: how does this verdict impact Balwani's trial? only if the media impacts his trial and makes it harder to find a jury, but it might change the way that the prosecutors present evidence. They might go back and look at what if the jurors talked to them or do talk to them, it might change the way they present things. It can change the way they call witnesses because it's like a retrial where you can bring up things that were said. If a witness in the Balwani trial says something that is different than what they said in the Holmes trial, you can bust out the transcript and be like, "You've previously testified." They wouldn't say at what, because they also have transcripts of SEC hearings, but it would be like, "You previously testified this, this, and this. So which is it? Is it this or this?" So there's more information for the Balwani trial, which just creates a lot more work. His attorneys would have paid very close attention to the things that were argued by Holmes's attorneys and the things that the juries say stuck out in their mind. So it will definitely inform that trial. And so I don't think the verdicts will impact it other than informing how both the defense and prosecution go about presenting evidence. Beth, thank you for the super chat. Do investors get any money back, or is that a civil case? The investors don't necessarily get money back. If she has to pay restitution, some of the restitution will go back to them. But that is if the court decides that she is going to pay restitution. The company went belly up. Like, that money's gone. The $100 million is gone. It's a lot of money. Like, we're hundreds of millions of dollars. This case charged over $700 million that was alleged to be defrauded. And with regard to those frauds, the jury couldn't decide on 3 counts and said yes on 4 counts. So it's a lot of it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But no, the investors don't just necessarily get money back. If there's restitution, they can get some. Barco said regarding Holmes, is it 1, possible, and or 2, likely that the judge will allow new mom Holmes to stay out on bond pending completion of appeal? It really depends on what went on in the trial. I didn't see any hugely appealable issues, and I don't know if there are any big glaring, like, there were glaring issues for me in the Rittenhouse trial. I have not seen anything reported that would say, "Oh my god, this is a problem." So possibly not. If there's not anything where the judge is like, "Ooh, that one's on the line," you might get an appeal granted. But you never know, because you often have federal judges sentencing and putting over for time. I could very realistically see them waiting till the child's a year old, and no longer nursing. They staggered time with the Judice case. If they're not worried somebody's going to run, they might put over, especially when we're looking at financial crimes and not violent crimes. They might sentence and put over her date to turn herself in for another 6 months, or to the end of the Balwani trial, or what have you. So I don't know if they will let her out pending the completion of appeal, but they might give her time until her child's a little older. That's possible. Tropicali said, as a healthcare worker, I find it a little disappointing that she was not convicted on patient fraud. Accurate lab results are vital for self-care. I agree with you. It's just whether she, as the CEO, did it when the technology wasn't working. And I think it breaks down on what acts of fraud she committed, and did she actively herself defraud patients, or was it that the company was being misleading and not her directly? It'll be interesting to see what the jury says if we hear from them, and I think that we probably will. This is not the kind of case where a jury, like, this case isn't so politically polarizing that a jury is going to be afraid to speak to the media. I hope we see some of the jurors speak to either John Carreyrou or ABC for the dropout. I hope we hear from them and what went on in the jury room. I'm very curious. And if we hear, I will tell you what I think. I'll be like, "Ooh, this is what they said." Because that's the only way we're going to know, is what they said. We can speculate all day long and go, could be this, could be that. But at the end of the day, it could be lunch meat, it could be peaches, and we just don't know. Hollister 74 said, just a little something for your demonetization issues. I mean, I share it so you understand why it frustrates me. We will always find you despite suppression. I appreciate that. That's where I say, join the text crew at Text Emily. Follow me on social at the Emily D. Baker, so that you know, because videos like this do get suppressed on YouTube. And channels grow when the algorithm helps people find you. but we cover topics like this because they're important and they matter. The Alza84 said, too many people here to have under 700 likes. Go hit the like button. I just imagine everybody's the over 4,000 of us here are just like, ooh, we want to talk about it. But yes, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps. Tamara Davis, that sucks on the monetization stinginess. It happens. Here's a wee bit to cover the loss that came from my pew. Love you, girl. Well, thank you so much. And that is we've covered most of our super chats. If there's any that are down below that haven't popped up yet, I'll be able to pop them up. And we're going to get to some more questions. So thank you. Sad trombone was definitely not the wrong button. I tried to drink my coffee with the flapper thing down. So question, why should a woman with a baby get special treatment over a man with a baby when it comes to sentencing? Charlene, I agree with you, but they will probably take the fact that she is nursing into consideration if that is an argument that her legal team makes. I am speculating on what arguments they might make. And the judicial system still kind of breaks down along traditional gender roles in that even in family law court, you see different considerations given for mothers versus fathers. That is how it is right now. Do I think that's changing? Some. Is it all changing? No. Will Elizabeth Holmes's attorneys lean into, but she has a young child? Yes. But she also made that choice. She's 37 years old. She went 37 years of her life without getting pregnant to our knowledge. And so, or without having a child. So we know that she is capable of not having children. This was a choice. And I wonder if the choice was, well, if I get 10 years in prison, I'll be too old to have a child. So better to have a child now and then be out of prison one day because I'm young, or better to have a child now and, assume that even if I get convicted, I'll just get probation and it'll all be fine. But it will be taken into consideration by the judge. The defense will argue it, and the prosecution will say it shouldn't be taken into effect. It shouldn't be taken into consideration. People who have children go to prison every day, and she should go to prison. So that. Question, will the fact that Elizabeth Holmes took the stand and perjured herself affect the sentencing? Grace, if the judge finds that she said things that were not true on the stand, yes, it can absolutely impact the way that the judge sees her truthfulness, her accepting of responsibility of her actions and things like that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Question, who is guilty of defrauding the patients if she's not guilty of it? Well, Sunny Balwani was the COO. I could see them still finding him guilty of defrauding patients because he was the one running the lab. They might have said, look, the person in charge of the lab was the one really overseeing these results and sending them out. It might have been the lab director and not the CEO of the company. So, Evie, wondering where we can send a message about advertising. Depending on what that's relating to, I have a public-facing email address that is in the descriptions of all of my videos and on my social medias. And anything you guys need to get to me can go there. Do you think Holmes will go to some place like Camp Cupcake? Is Camp Cupcake where Martha Stewart went? She'll go to federal prison. I mean, she'll go to a federal white-collar crime prison. I don't know if ever being in prison is easy, but there are prisons that are definitely rougher than others. She will be at a federal, probably minimal security women's prison. Pocket Angie Tips question, are you happy being back to a normal schedule? I don't feel normal yet because the kids aren't back to school, but yes, I am reevaluating my schedule. I love streaming, so I love being here. Though that said, I will be taking a break next week. I will be taking a break next week because I need to do a reset because I've been working quite a lot and because I think we're going to hit hopefully a little bit of a slow patch. So next week, we will only have our members only live stream for those of you that are members on YouTube or Patreon and the podcast episode, but there won't be other streams. Of course, I say that now and I plan for it now. If something goes completely off the fucking rails, will I maybe reassess? Maybe. But I shouldn't. I am supposed to be taking a break. We need to reset a little bit. H3 filed a notice of related case in the Triller case. Does that mean anything? No. There are related cases, so I'm not surprised that there are a notice of related cases. I will be checking back in on the Trilleriness of it all later this week. I really want that judge to make a ruling in the LA case. but that hearing is not till later this month. The Journey to Becoming Me said, so if it were found out that she did the pregnancy on purpose, would that affect her sentencing? Her significant other is not her spouse. I mean, I have no problem with people having children with who they have children with, married or not. That really, I don't know, live your life. Like I'm generally not bothered unless you're Tristan Thompson, and then I'm bothered. Unless you're Tristan Thompson, then I'm bothered. I'm bothered by Tristan Thompson cheating on Khloe Kardashian. I'm bothered by that, but, her significant other not being her spouse really shouldn't come into play court-wise. I think that the prosecution has to be very, very careful about arguing that. I think they will probably tiptoe into the, this is not a reason to mitigate her sentencing, like, her having a child is not a reason to mitigate. Though the prosecution could just say, "Fuck it," and swing for the fences and say, "Look, Your Honor, she is so low down on the level of taking responsibility for this that she got pregnant knowing that she was pending a criminal trial, knowing that she could go to prison, and she just doesn't give a fuck about anyone else except for her and what she wants. And that shows you that she has not taken responsibility for this and should go to prison for more time." So we'll see. I don't know if we'll ever know what she was thinking when she did that. I think it's just speculation. So, in addition to prison time, can the judge prevent her from starting another company? She can There can be certain orders made, but I think the regulatory agencies have rules against somebody who has felonies starting publicly traded companies, etc. So I think she's already blocked by some of the regulatory, and I would need to go look at the SEC, but I think there are some things that she would already be blocked from starting another company. But yeah, it's something that can come up if it's not already handled on the regulatory side of things, which the AUSAs would know, and might come up in their sentencing memo. So we will see. But it is possible that in addition to jail time, there can be other types of forestallment against behavior, because once you're a convicted felon, your rights can be forestalled in a different way. Does the prosecution have a time limit to decide on whether or not a retrial? I would need to look at the statute of limitations on it, but they can't hold it out forever. There are statutes of limitations on these cases. And so there would be a time wherein they have to bring it. I don't remember exactly what that time is. They can't bring it 5 years from now. So, hey, Emily, any update on the H3 I was just saying I should do that. I was just saying I should do that. Um, let's see. Let me pull it up real quick. I want to see what's happening in the LA case. Let me just go find the case number. Because I don't have there's things I do not know off the top of my head. Britney Spears' case number, yes, I know that one off the top of my head. My parents' phone number from when I was growing up, I know that off the top of my head. The H3 case numbers, I absolutely do not. There are too many. There are too many of them. Let's see. Because now we've got both the Kavanaugh Klein one and the Triller Ted one. So I'm gonna pull up the California one that's pending the anti-slap and go from there. But I will also be looking at these before Friday Night Live, because I will probably do quick bits on Friday Night Live to see. Let's see what documents have been filed. Just a notice of related case. So, and that's, I mean, we can go look at it real quick, what the notice of related case is. I wonder if, okay, the only reason I wonder if the related case is something that we want to know about is I wonder if Ethan filed a lawsuit. If he did, I feel like maybe we would have heard about it, but let me pull it up real quick. Because if there's a new lawsuit, then I'll probably cover that. Not today, but I will read it and cover it. So let's take a look at what this notice of related case says. Because that matters. Let's see. Because it's being filed by, all right, let's just, this is going to take 100 years to download. This is being filed by Ethan Klein and not by, oh no, this is a notice of related case regarding the Kavanaugh TED Entertainment. So this is them saying to the court, hey, by the way, Kavanaugh's also sued us, versus Kavanaugh filing the notice of related case. So it's just letting the court know that the Kavanaugh lawsuit has been filed. Let me just double check and make sure that's the exact same case number. 1868. As you guys are just now watching me work. Let me just make sure that is the Kavanaugh Klein 1868 case. Yeah, that's the same case. So it's just letting the court know that Kavanaugh sued the same company. So that's it. But I will go parsing through all of the cases and see what happened. Let's see. We're gonna get to a few more questions. Did Prince Andrew basically admit guilty by stating he should have been included in Epi's secret settlement with Virginia Giuffre? No, he's saying, look, the Giuffre settlement said anyone connected to this shouldn't be sued because it says any future defendant. I am being sued in connection with this. I shouldn't be sued. No one should be able to be sued in connection with this because of the settlement. So no, not admitting guilt. Legal wrangling is what's going on with that. So, let's see. Question, is there a minimum time the jury needs to deliberate before they can decide it's a hung jury? Can the judge make them keep deliberating? Afra, it depends on the jury. It depends on the judge. It depends on the case. So to lawyer the shit out of this, it depends like 6 ways from Saturday. It depends. If the jury has been deliberating for a day and is like, oh, we can't decide, the judge might be like, go back and deliberate for another day. Like, you've deliberated for a day. But if the evidence lasted 6 hours and the jury's deliberated for 12 and is like, we can't decide, then maybe they really can't decide. If the jury comes into the courtroom like this and they're all pissed at each other and it's a 6-6 split and they can't come to anything, because sometimes the judge will ask what the split is depending on the case, then they can be sent back. There's no like hard and fast rule. It really, really depends. And in this case, the judge gave them additional instructions, sent them back, and they came back and said they were hung. They've deliberated for a number of days after a months-long trial. And the judge would ask the foreperson, do you think there's anything we can provide to help? Is there any evidence you can look at? Is there anything else you need? And if the jury's like, no, we just don't see it the same, we just don't agree, and we're not going to come to a decision, there's not much additional deliberation is going to do for them. So, will Maxwell have any psych help in prison so that she understands how much real damage she did to these girls? If she gets psychiatric help, which will be available to her, she will have to, should be available to her. They've been keeping her in solitary. It should be available to her. If it is available to her, she has to choose it. And will they have a goal? No, I don't think that's the purpose of therapy. Will they be like, you need to understand what you did? No, I think they will be helping her process it in whatever way that's appropriate, but they won't be outcome determinant, if that makes sense. So what else? Thank you, Opinionated Cat. That is how I find questions. It makes it so much easier for me because question, Judy, this is a great question. Why are some cases on TV and others not? First, it depends. Second, federal court. Federal court does not allow cameras, recording devices, video cameras, or anything into the courtrooms. It's why you see the sketch artist renderings from federal court. That is a federal court rule. I hope in the coming years it changes. There is some of the federal court cases are very high profile, very large, and very significant, and I think should be open to the public. That said, they are open to the public in the sense that you can go down to the courthouse, wait in line, and get in and sit and watch it happen. But technology has made access to courts different in that you can listen to court hearings, you can see them on television. TV cameras are not so obstructive anymore. You can stream it from literally an iPad in the back of the room hooked up to power and hardwired or hooked up to Wi-Fi. So, it might not be a quality stream, but you theoretically could. So I think there needs to be some reimagining of access to the courts. Some courts allow you to call in for certain procedures and proceedings and hear them. Some courts allow none of it. Some judges say, yes, we this is a matter of broader interest than local interest, and we can allow it to be televised. And some courts say no. Each court has their own rules. Each judge has their own way that they evaluate this. And it also has to deal with the propriety and the protection sometimes of the witnesses, like the Maxwell case. Even if it wasn't in federal court, I don't think it would have been televised to protect the witnesses who are also victims from testifying, and protect their identities and protect their names from being out in public. So there are some cases that are going to be more sensitive where they will not be televised because of that, or they will not be televised in their entirety. So it is a push pull with the system. I wish everything was more open, and it's like, okay, well, you don't show the jury, which is appropriate, but you can also maybe not show that witness and just hear them. So we'll see. Yeah, so we'll see. Um Sister Babylon, question: if Meredith and Mary did dime out Jen Shaw, would they have been told to stay away from her during the arrest? Um, I don't think Mary or Meredith dimed out Jen Shaw to the feds. That is a substantial and ongoing federal investigation. I've talked about this on a few podcasts and with Up and Adam as well. Um, I I think it's interesting that both of them weren't there at the time of arrest, but I don't think anyone knew that arrest was going down. The feds are much more careful than that. They don't want any potential tip off. They don't want any incident. They don't want any evidence destroyed. They don't want any they just don't want there to be any incident with arrest. They want it to be easy and quick, but they were tracking her cell phone. So of course they knew she was at Beauty Lab and Laser. They had her cell phone GPS coordinates. So they knew where she was going to be. And they knew she wasn't at home because they went to her home first. So I don't think they dimed out Jen. I don't think they were involved. I could be wrong. My strong suspicion is the feds don't give a shit about her other cast members, and they knew where she was going to be. I don't even think they called production, because if they had called production, here's just my speculation. If they had called production, would production have worked harder to keep Jen Shaw on site and been like, no, you can't go? Because production would have known that the story about Sharif was all BS. So wouldn't production have been like, no, just wait for a minute, blah, blah, blah? Because if your production isn't your main focus, getting that all on camera, we'll see. Question: was there a reason why they made separate trials for Elizabeth Holmes and her ex, Sunny Balwani? Yes. Elizabeth Holmes, and I think Balwani as well, though I would have to double check to be 100% on that, made motions. I know Holmes made motions to separate the two trials. After it came out that Holmes was going to be talking about the relationship, or was making motions to bring in accusations that Balwani has denied, that the relationship was controlling and abusive, essentially what reporters and John Carreyrou have been calling kind of the Svengali defense. It's not uncommon that this happens. It's like, no, I was so manipulated, I had to do it because they manipulated me. That could create a situation where it would be unfair evidence against Balwani that wouldn't be heard in his trial. So you would need then two juries, and during a panini, you cannot have a dual jury easily. So I think for all of those reasons, it made sense that the judge granted the split trials. The prosecution objected to it and wanted both defendants to be there together. So then you hear everything between the two. But the motion was granted. I'm not surprised that it was. So this all has to happen again. These witnesses, most of them have to come back and testify again. And again, the Holmes trial wouldn't have come about but for whistleblowers. We're gonna just talk for a second. I've seen a lot of conversation on social media saying, Holmes got away with way too much, or Holmes is getting prosecuted because she's a woman, because she was young, all of this. I think part of the reason that the Theranos empire came down is because of the whistleblowers who had integrity in the medical space. This was not just defrauding investors, this was harming patients. And the reason that the whistleblowers came forward is because they believed patients were being harmed, and that this testing wasn't good enough to give results to patients. And they were like, no, this is wrong. A lot of the time, you don't have whistleblowers, so these things go unchecked, or you have people that would be whistleblowers that just walk away. When you listen to the stories of Tyler Schultz and Erica, you hear what they suffered because they were whistleblowers. You hear about them being followed and sued and, almost or alleged to be harassed through court process, the money that they spent, the jobs that were lost, the stress, the anxiety of what this did to them. It's not an easy path. Yes, now, years and years and years later, they are proven to be right. They are vindicated, they are venerated, and we are glad that they blew the whistle. But in the moment when it was happening, it was not easy for them. Um, with regard to Tyler Schultz going against his family, who was on the board of Theranos. When it comes to Erica moving and being followed by David Boyce and his team of investigators and being scared and harassed and getting cease and desist and being very young and not really knowing what to do. So it's not easy to be a whistleblower, but I don't think this is like, oh, she's taking the fall because she's a woman. I think the reason this case came down is because there were people with integrity that were not intimidated and that would not be silenced that came forward and continued to come forward. That's why this case was prosecuted. It's because of them. So I will just take a moment, to step back down, um, for sure. So that. Question: why are the dollar amounts listed separately? Would think the investors would all be listed into count one of fraud. Is that the possibility of recovering funds, or is that for the possibility of recovering funds? Brittany, that is a fantastic question. Let me just pull it up again. So I love a good visual so that we have it. Where are my Holmes? Where are my Holmes notes? Holmes notes, Holmes notes. Let's pull up the where is it? Let's pull up the indictment, because the indictment, and this is the first superseding, this is not the third superseding indictment, but I'm just going to pull up the first indictment because the amounts didn't change. So when we get to and these I shared on social media as well, and these were in the jury instructions as well. This is the indictment that lists the amounts. So these were not listed by investor name because these are wire fraud. This this wire transfer, this specific transfer, this date, this amount from this bank to this bank. That is the fraud right there. So these are listed because the money moving was the count. It was the money moving that is the basis of the wire fraud versus the patient results moving that was the wire fraud, or the amount of money used to purchase uh, advertisements to induce people to go to use Theranos machines. That was the wire fraud. So that's why the amounts were listed. It's because those amounts are one wire transaction for each of them that were the ones that were the basis essentially of each element of wire fraud. You have to have that wire transmission, and these are the wire transmissions alleged. So two patient results, money to buy advertisements, and then money from investors into Theranos's bank account. That was an awkward, like my brain was like moving like this and my mouth was moving like this. Hello, Lord Caraco Squirrel. Technically, the Duggar counts are not violent offenses either, which I know is staggering, but they are not technically considered violent crimes either, but they are definitely much more substantial and serious crimes, like the crimes in the Maxwell case, because of the nature of the crime. But technically, they are not considered violent offenses either, because they are possession of images and not creation of images and not hands-on things. So me being all like, well, actually, but in the world of how cases are broken down, that's why the amounts of time are different. But it is definitely a more substantial type of crime in the eyes of the courts than fraud. White collar crime does not get taken seriously enough by judges, I don't think. But anyway, question: will the prosecution say that she cheated with Sonny. She cheated on Sonny. She had a baby to secure her attachment to this wealthy family, so there's no limit to her fraud. I mean, they might. They can argue whatever they want. We will see what they say in their sentencing memos. I'm gonna be going on over the sentencing memos for this case, for the Duggar case, and for the Maxwell case. I mean, we're not done. There's convictions, but the sentencing memos will be very enlightening, and we will go over them too. I will generally wait with the sentencing memos unless there's something like explosive in them until we have both sides so we can go through what both sides are arguing because I think that that's important. You guys, as I'm seeing Cade's all of the purple hearts in the chat, just a reminder to go ahead and give a huge, big thank you to our moderators who keep the chat being an easy place for me to read and navigate so I can answer as many questions as possible, but also just a fun place to be. So, absolutely. Erica said suppression is real. I will stop a video and come back and it will take forever to refind it. The suppression on YouTube is real. I choose to work within it instead of being on other platforms because I think that calling it out and making plans to work within it pushes the platform up. And I generally do like the platform. I really do like YouTube. There are things, and these are algorithms, right? How do you teach a computer that when one creator is talking about, I'll use Duggar for example, when one creator is talking about Duggar, we are talking about the jury instructions and we are talking about the law and we are talking about the facts and we're talking about what was said in court and why there's clergy privilege here or there. But other creators are talking about every graphic detail of what the possessed images are and what the gory history of those are and kind of exploiting all of those horrific details. The algorithm just sees the name and the way that it's being talked about and lumps that all together. And then it takes human review to parse that out. And it just takes some time for the algorithm to learn those things between what's being sensationalized or horrified and what's not, which is why even back when the Michael Scarn, the James Charles scandals were going on, that those videos were also getting kind of throttled on YouTube because it's like, well, the scandal is revolving around this subject matter. And so if people are talking about this subject matter, is that appropriate subject matter for the broader viewing audience? Or is that something that you should just go searching for if you want to see it? So those are the things where it's like up and down. Are you going to have a new subscriber goal for this new year? I mean, Flying Monkey Mom, I think we're still trying to get to 200K. I think that we'll get there. We're almost at 192. Look, everything comes to like a screeching halt in January, so I'm not super worried about it, but we're just a few subscribers away from 192, which is very exciting. So if you're in the over 4,000 people watching, go ahead and do the subscribing things. Because yay, do the subscribing things. But do I have a new subscriber goal? Yes. I'm going to just, in the new year, we're going to have more subscribers than PewDiePie. No, that's ridiculous. We're going to keep growing the Law Nerd, and I keep looking at each subscriber goal. So when we get to 200,000, I'll be really excited when we get to 250, and then I'll be really excited when we get to 300, and then I'll be really excited as we continue to go, and we'll continue to have goals along the way. And I will absolutely be excited, when we get to 500,000, when we get to 1 million. But when that will happen, I don't know. As long as our community is still a fun place to be, the subscriber goals are a lot of fun to hit, but it's also being in the chat and seeing y'all in the chat and getting to be together matters. So that. Coffee's almost gone. Oranges said, can the patients sue anyone else within the company for the false results? Can there be civil lawsuits? Not really. Some of these things, the dates on them are beyond what a statute of limitations would be. And bad results happen. Is it malpractice? I mean, I would have to substantially look at what the regulations and requirements are for lab testing companies, but some of these results are quite old. In the fraud realm, they're still within the statute of limitations, but in the civil realm, they might not be. And for what damages? I don't know if you would even cover legal costs on the emotional side of it. And yes, there is an emotional side of it. Some of these patients have horrific stories, but in the civil realm of where that amounts to how much money you get, I don't even know if it would cover the cost of the attorneys. And for most patients, would that be worth it when they did get lab results? And even though they went through the mental anguish of having the wrong results and then finally getting the right results, how do you put a dollar figure on that? And is that ever going to be high enough to deal with the cost of going after a company that is no longer in operation and that has no money? Um, I don't know. I think it would be tremendously difficult. So can and should are two very different things there. I think it would be very, very difficult. But I also think we might have a statute of limitations issue. So I would have to think on that, but I don't see anyone going that route, and I'm not surprised. Joe Jersey, thank you for all of the prayers for my mom before Christmas. Mom passed and joined dad on December 23rd. Dad passed in 98. Joe Jersey, I am sorry for the loss of your mom. I know you've been sharing that in the chats with the law nerds and that we had been keeping your mom in our thoughts. So it's always hard. It feels particularly hard at the holidays. But it is always, always hard. So I am well behind in the chat. So did I mix sad trombone and clapping? I did. That's how far behind I am in the chat. I'm going to try to speed up because I know there's probably more questions. Um, Mystic said, I'm surprised I didn't find your channel sooner, but I'm so glad you did. Thank you. I'm glad you did too. I mean, I feel like the best kept secret on the internet sometimes, but then also not, because there's times I feel like I'm everywhere. So a combination of both. Um, Question: if someone testifies in the Holmes trial and then testifies in the Balwani trial, isn't honest, can they be prosecuted? It depends on it depends on what happens. So if you lie in court, is it perjury? Yes. Can you be prosecuted for perjury? Yes. It just really depends on the circumstances and what goes down. If somebody says, oh, the date was this, but they've forgotten the date was that, is that perjury or a mistake? And so it depends. Willfully misleading, yes, people can be prosecuted, but without like hey, in this trial they said this and in this trial they said that, it's hard to prosecute someone for perjury. Let me just show you an example real quick. Since we have a perjury example on the top of mind with the Maxwell case, let me just show you real quick how it's alleged in the Maxwell case. Let me pull up let me get back to my Maxwell folder and pull up her indictment real quick because it's alleged there. Let's see. Here's the superseding indictment. All right. Superseding means the subsequent indictment. So in the Maxwell case, we have the perjury charges still to go, and those are towards the end of this indictment. So let's get down to the end here and work our way back up. Come on, computer, just go ahead and there we go. Populate. Thank you. So these are the two perjury counts, 7 and 8. 7, thank you. The grand jury further alleges that on or about April 22nd, 2016, in the Southern District of New York, Maxwell, having taken an oath to testify truthfully in a deposition in connection with a case then pending before the U.S. District Court, knowingly made false and material declarations. To wit, Maxwell gave the following underlined false testimony. Did Epstein, well, we've already said Epstein. Did Epstein have a scheme to recruit underage girls for adult massages? If you know, I don't know what you're talking about. Question: listing all the people under the age of 18 that you interacted with at any list all the people you under the age of 18 you interacted with at any of Epstein's properties. I'm not aware of anyone that I interacted with other than obviously the plaintiff, who was 17 at this point. So there was, they're saying there were clearly others, and she's been convicted of that. So this is going through her testimony to very specific statements of perjury. So it matters. The question matters. What was said matters. She answered, I wasn't aware that he was having adult activities with anyone when I was with him other than myself. That is my testimony. That's correct. I've not given anyone a massage. That is my testimony. I never gave minor to a massage. And so I don't know whether she will plead to these things or they will try these things. But when you look at a perjury case, you're looking at those specific statements and pulling them out. So it matters. So. the perjury case I tried, the thing that they said happened was on video, and so I got to play the video over and over while they were on the stand and go, "Okay, show me where it happened." And they're like, "Oh, you missed it." I'm like, "We're playing the video in front of the jury. We're playing the video where? Where did it happen? Where did you fall on this bus that you said in your civil lawsuit and your depositions? Where did it happen?" So doing a criminal perjury trial was very, very interesting. They are not super common. So, question, do you have an opinion on Canada's lockdown? I am not Canadian, I am not in Canada, so my I don't know how much my opinion, matters. I am sure that Viva Fry is covering it and other Canadian content creators are covering it. I also follow Renee Ritchie, who's also in Quebec on Twitter and other places, so I follow others, but it is, it is not something really that I've looked at. I don't know the ins and outs of, and I don't know what the laws in Canada are well. So other Canadian commentators, I'm sure, have that. Question: will you speak on Ela Teddy Fresh's lawsuit, or is it the same as Ethan's? Ela and Teddy Fresh have been roped into one of the three lawsuits that's going on in the Trillery trifecta of lawsuits, trying to make Teddy Fresh, or no, two of them, I think they pulled them in the federal one as well, trying to make Teddy Fresh somehow responsible for what happens on the podcast. I don't think that's going to fly, but they're going through the anti-slap motion. I have covered it when I've covered those lawsuits. After the anti-slap motion, then if the anti-slap motion isn't granted and the lawsuit survives and continues going, then we will talk about how Teddy Fresh will get out of that lawsuit. I don't think they're a proper party. So that. Question, did you see new Britney motions? New since when? And no, I haven't, but I will be swooping all of the stuff that we cover for Friday. Question, can you explain why you think the Maxwell customers won't ever be prosecuted? I think if they were going to do it, they would have done it. They haven't seemed to bring um a whole bunch of indictments. They clearly would have had that information. The government has talked to the government prosecutors have talked to these victims that they brought in for the Maxwell trial. They easily could have had those conversations of who else were you involved with and bring those prosecutions, and they haven't. I mean, maybe they will. I suspect that they will not. But we will see. Some things might be outside of the statute of limitations because the customers might not have been part of the conspiracy. They would have just been part of the acts. But those acts, those acts for the underage girls have a very long statute of limitations. So I am skeptical on that. Very, very skeptical. So, yep. Let's see. More questions. Oops. I think we got I think I clarified, hopefully. Questions. Will other high-level Theranos employees face consequences? Yes. Sunny Balwani, the COO, will. I don't think they're going after the lab cases and stuff like that. So, or the lab techs. I don't think they are. Question, are you covering the Megan Thee Stallion criminal court case on January 13th? Shirley, I need to take a look at what hearing is coming up on the 13th because they just did the preliminary hearing not that long ago. I don't know if that's the trial, and I'm assuming that you're talking about her being shot by Tory Lanez, and I will keep an eye on it. Tory Lanez is being represented by, I think still represented, by Sean Chapman Holly. So I will absolutely take a look at it. I think that's being prosecuted by family violence at the LA DA's office, but I don't know if that is starting trial then. So let's see. Question, did you see the TikToker who was threatened by a Texas judge for putting his courtroom on TikTok? I did not see that. But if they did not have express written permission from the court to record, then it is illegal to do so, and you can actually go to jail. In most places, it's a misdemeanor, but you can go to jail for illegally recording in a courtroom. You need lots of permission, all of the permission. which is part of why the remote audio program got shut down in after the Britney audio was leaked. Um, Charlene, question: any chance the victims can confront Maxwell like the ones in the Nasser case did? Absolutely. At sentencing, there should be time for the victims to make victim impact statements, and that's not just the named victims in the case. Other victims can make victim impact statements where appropriate. So yes, there should be an opportunity for that. I hope there will at least be audio in the court. There might not be. I would hope that there would be. Some of the hearings in that case have been audioed. We'll see. So we will see. Um, will Maxwell be deported after her sentence is complete? I don't know if she will be deported after her sentence is complete. She may be allowed to choose to leave. Once we see how long she's sentenced for, I will give you my thoughts on the probability of her completing her sentence and walking out of custody. Depending on how long her sentence is, that might not happen. So, I'm going to get to a few more questions and then we are going to wrap up because I promised the kids that we would have lots to do this afternoon before they go back to school. Artsy said, love listening to your content while I work. I testify as an expert, but never see the big picture. Thanks for breaking it all down for us. You are welcome. And it is sometimes when you're an expert, you only see the part that you're given. I try to see the big picture. It's harder when we don't have as much reporting. The Holmes reporting has been really excellent, and that has made it easier for me to give kind of commentary and thought to it. Question: when the sentencing is tallied up, what is the minimum percentage of time Holmes has to serve? Thank you. 0 is the minimum amount of times Holmes has to serve. There is no mandatory minimum sentence. She could get probation. I don't think she will, but she could get probation. So I'm going to put on my, it's gotten very cold in here. So hopefully this isn't too loud. I have a space heater. But your girl's cold. I need to order more sweatshirts from the Law Nerd shop. I have a lot of t-shirts and not as many sweatshirts, and I need to order some more. So technically 0. She could get probation. I hope she won't, but she could. Question per Holmes. I'm assuming the individual patients in the last few counts are allowed to sue personally. Do you think that's likely? I don't think it's likely. I think it would be very hard for them to sue the CEO of a company personally for bad test results. I think that would be very, very difficult. But I think I already answered that above. So hopefully, let's see. Hello, Tracy. Question: do you think anything will come of the Prince Andrew side of the Epstein Maxwell case? Other than the civil suits, no. I think it will just be civil suits. I believe most of that, well, some of it occurred in New York, but I just don't think they will try to prosecute him criminally. So I just don't. Thank you guys for the mod love. Now I know how far behind I am in the chat. When we hit 200K, can the ASMR channel get another reading? I have been meaning to, it's every single week it's on my list to do more ASMR videos. I am going to sit down for like 2 days and kind of batch record some of them. But yes, the ASMR channel is going to get some more readings. I am not done with the historical documents that we've been needing to do. I just have been delayed at sitting down to do them because they do take a bit of time. And we've had so much to cover on the channel. So yes, soon. That is my goal. So let's see. I'm going to get to just a few more questions. Question: in the civil suits against her, Elizabeth's lawyer said she didn't have any money and plaintiffs didn't get much, but how can that be true when she paid top money for her criminal defense? Patty, it doesn't mean she's the one paying for her criminal defense. There might be people benefiting her. This is something that has been alluded to with regard to Erica Girardi as well. It's who's paying her legal fees. It might not be her. She might not be paying her legal fees. So that that might be the case. So conservative voices, this is not how we discuss in our chat. This is not how we discuss in our chat at all. I'm sure the mods already told you that, but I'm also telling you that. We have compassionate and adult conversation, and you are welcome to do that or not. But I'm just letting you know. Otherwise, you get bounced. Gabrielle, thank you. Because of you, I will be starting school to be a paralegal on the 15th of this month. Thanks for making law fun. You're welcome. Law is very, very interesting. So it is a interesting career. It's interesting to learn about. Being a paralegal, you get to dig into all of the fascinating parts of it, but you also have to deal with lawyers. So also know yourself. And you need to think, watch The Devil Wears Prada and kind of channel some of your inner assistant to a crazy person boss vibes, because lawyers can be very difficult. And remember, a lot of the time they are hungry. So if you feed them, it might help. That is my best advice. Make sure the lawyers are hydrated and fed, and look for a working environment that has a good percentage of diverse attorneys. You do not want to go work for a firm where you look around and you're like, oh, it's all white dudes. Cool. Because there's going to be a different culture there. When you see a more diverse law firm, it might be a more pleasant place to work. That is one of the things. When you don't get everyone quitting before they have children and leaving the firm, you really can see what the working environment is like. So look for a diverse firm or a small boutique firm of just a few lawyers who you enjoy working with, because large firm life, though it can pay well, can also suck your soul. That's just my thoughts on it. Just my thoughts on it. But there's plenty of paralegals in the chat that can give you their thoughts on that. Make sure that you are, because working with lawyers can be difficult. I don't always like working with lawyers. I like chatting with other lawyers. I don't always like working with other lawyers. So let us see what else. Question, can you cover the Dana Hollister bankruptcy case? She and Katy Perry fought for a LA Covenant property. A Dunn literally died in court. Wait, what? Now Dana is selling her home for $30 million to cover the bankruptcy fees. I have never even heard of this, Irvin, but I will make a note, because what? I'm fascinated. So it's going on the list. You saw me. I made a note. It's going on the list. I'm fascinated. Question, are you going to cover Todd Chrisley and Katie's trial? Oh, they're just in discovery. They're a long way from trial. I will cover more motions. We took a break, but I will cover more motions as they come up for sure, if there's anything of note. Otherwise, it will get addressed in the quick bits and stuff of like, this is what's happening. They're in discovery. So there is not much going on, and there won't be for a little bit. So that is what's going on. Let me see. We're going to get a few more. I think what Ms. Zeppelin said, what a great question about the deportation. I think so too. We will have to see what goes on sentencing. It is possible. Barco, Tiger King got a new sentencing hearing. I thought I heard something about Scott Peterson out in Cali getting another go at sentencing as well. They changed Scott Peterson's sentence. I will put those things on the list for our weekly roundup on Friday, because we haven't touched on them. But a Scott Peterson sentence, I think, converted to a different type of life sentence, but I need to go back and look through it. I didn't follow it closely. Lawyers sound like cats. Keep them fed and well hydrated, or they'll get catty. It's accurate, especially lawyer cats. Lawyer cats are the most particular kind. The most particular kind of cats, the lawyer cats. The lawyer cats are the particular. I was so mad about the lawyer cat video getting taken off of Twitter. I don't know what happened, but I saw Judge Ferguson talking about it. So I retweeted it. I'm like, Twitter, give us our lawyer cat. Give us lawyer cat. We want lawyer cat. We need lawyer cat. I am here live. I am not a cat. We always need lawyer cat. So I was appealing to the Twitters to bring back lawyer cat. I know, it's the only filter I have. It's creepy. I know. Let us go back to Emily as I say goodbye. So you say hello and I say goodbye. Okay. Nirvana, I did not say anyone killed a nun. It said a nun literally died in court. Look, ambulances came to court all the time. People had heart attacks. People had like medical emergencies at court are not uncommon. I didn't hear it as anybody killed a nun. It said a nun literally died in court. So literally died in court and killing a nun are two different things. So, that's what it is. So let us say goodbye. Cheers. Thank you, Law Nerds. Thank you for the Law Nerd compassionate conversation. Thank you, mods, for being amazing. Thank you to the chat. Again, we need to go. If you want to follow me on the social medias at theemilydbaker.com. If you want to join the text crew, if you are in North America, you can do that at textemily.com. We'll get you into the text crew. You'll get reminders when I go live. Birthday wishes when I don't completely fucking forget, which I have an alarm set on my phone so I don't forget. Those will be going out later today for today's birthdays. And if you want to join the deeper conversation, you can go to lawnerdsunite.com and come join us in the members only community. We will be having a members only live stream next week. And that is what's going on. So if you want to be a member, if you're a member here on the channel as a Law Nerd, or if you are a member over in the Law Nerd community, you will be part of that members only live stream. I'm pretty sure will be my only stream next week. That is the intent for it to be my only stream next week. But I hop on a plane, I take a day off, or I intend to, and all heck breaks loose. So that is what is going on around the interwebs. For my fastest responses to things, Twitter and Instagram is where I do things immediately. And then we get over here to the YouTubes once I've had a chance to A, think about it, and B, it's my normal streaming day on Tuesday or Friday. Tomorrow, there will be an episode of the podcast up. I will set up a premiere for it so we can be in the chat because I love chatting with y'all. So look for that tomorrow and go ahead and if you haven't liked and subscribed and set the bell, do those things. Do the things, do all the things, do all the YouTubey things. And with that, I will say farewell for now, and I will see you guys Friday for Friday Night Live. And if you are watching this replay, crew, thank you. There's a bunch of playlists covering all of these topics if you want to go check them out. I don't know if you can run out of content on this channel. There is so many hours and hours of stuff. Thank you for being a Law Nerd. 2022 is going to keep us busy in the law, and I can't wait to see what it brings. Hope you're doing well where this finds you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Bye. Connect with me everywhere. I'm at the Emily D. Baker. If you guys want to join the text, just text Emily.com. If you want to join the channel, lawnerdsunite.com. Happy to have you. Support what we do here on the YouTube.